Welcome back to Tear Us Apart, a podcast from England's footballing city. This week we look over Manchester United's goalless draw against Crystal Palace and what the Red Devils can learn from that performance. And Manchester City's clash against Arsenal was one for the history books as a turbulent game saw John Stones rescue a point for the Blues. This week I am joined by Ethan. No Adam, as he is hoping to get Wi-Fi next week. So all going well. Hopefully, Ethan, we'll get him on next week. What do you reckon the likelihood
So,
is?
well, considering his flat landlord, I wouldn't be too promising. Well, I wouldn't be too confident, put it that way.
Yeah, we'll see. Let's start off with Manchester United, though, and they obviously drew against Crystal Palace in a goalless draw. United dominated the first half with 68% possession, but they couldn't convert their chances into goals. Why do you think that was?
I don't think there's any particular reason. I just think it's unlucky. I do think it's a bit odd. Bruno's not been on it really this season so far. I think he's been a little bit shaky. Like he was really like a very consistent finisher in the first few years, but I think he's been a little bit off target so far. And obviously we just missed too many chances in the first half. But I don't think like I've talked a lot about criticizing Ten Hag and like his style of play and everything. We spoke about it last week on the podcast, but I don't think he can be blamed for Southampton. I think he coached a strong win, and United should have scored three, four maybe in the first half, and should have rolled to a comfortable victory. Not wait, did I say Southampton? Crystal Palace. Um, but obviously they don't take your chances and you pay the price. But I think if you compare that to obviously the 4-0 away last year, huge progress. It is like, yes, it's another drop points, but if you actually compare it, it's massive progress. We looked so much better. We were a little bit shakier in the last 10, 15. Well, the second Xerxes went off. That's the concerning thing. We lost all control because he was doing a lot of holding the ball up. And like he could feed it off to Ahmad and Garnacho. But yeah, and I think the whole like debate with Rashford and being sub, I think it's just good. It's healthy. You need it. United fans are so like weird about the second, like they complain about not having squad depth, and the second you have squad depth, they complain about their favorite player not starting. I think it's good.
Well,
It's good.
yeah, we'll get onto that in just a minute. But
Okay.
like you touched upon there about Ten Hag's style of play, it was one of, especially that first half, it seemed that he really put his blueprint on that half, really. And United sort of camped in
Yeah.
Palace's half. Mateta didn't really get any sight of goal, no opportunities whatsoever. Palace's first shot on target was in the 44th minute, and that was obviously Eze.
Now
So
compare that to last year when we were conceding 20 odd shots a game. Different. That's a huge change. Like we've gone out of the bottom three when we were in it before. Like we were like, yeah, terrible for it.
and it's completely different from that game against Palace away in May as well, where United obviously lost 4-0. You had Johnny Evans, who was out for 5 weeks, had one training session, came back, and had Casemiro next to him.
Yeah.
And then you compare that to Mateus de Ligt now with Lisandro Martinez. The defense is looking so much different.
Unparalleled.
We'll go on to Marcus Rashford now. You spoke about him being left out of the starting 11 to everyone's shock after 3 goals in 2 games. Exactly the same as Alejandro Garnacho, of course. Ten Hag did say, obviously, the decision was based on rotation. But my question to you is, if City rotate and Liverpool rotate, no one makes a big deal out of it. But all of a sudden, because United do, why is that the case? It's almost like people are trying to say, or they have done, that Rashford and Ten Hag have sort of fell out when that's probably not
Mm.
happened.
I don't know if it's about the fallout. I just think it's you need a story. They know that United will get clicks, and if you sort of spin it slightly that he's being left out, like you can just it's just how you get clicks. It's how you get interaction because Man United is a bigger name than Manchester City, and it's a bigger name than Liverpool. That's obvious. It gets you more interaction, and that's what the world of journalism is about these days. So I think it was just that, and but I don't think the United fans help it because they do make such a fuss on social media about like not being picked. And I think that's probably detrimental to it as well. But I think it's just one of them. It doesn't really matter because Garnacho is heavily deserving of the space, just as Rashford is, and I think that's healthy and that's good. Yeah, so I don't see any problems with it personally.
Because I thought it might have been a tactical decision at first, because if Palace sat back and then Garnacho and I feel like Ahmad break down side to a sat
Garnacho
back
was
better than Rashford does.
he was dangerous. He should have scored probably. When he was making those bursting runs into the box. Well, sort of like the running off the ball. getting into space. He looked quite dangerous first half. Then second half didn't not quite as much. Just didn't look as good after literally after Xerxes went off, lost all control, which is a bit worrying. But I mean, because when Rasmus Højlund came on, it was I remember there was one moment in particular when I can't remember who fired it into him, but someone fired a ridiculously strong pass into him,
It
and it
bounced.
just bounced straight off him. And I thought, if that's Xerxes, he takes it in and he spreads it wide, and that's the difference. Like if you're just trying to play the same style with two completely like Højlund wants to run at defenders, Xerxes likes to play with his back to goal, so you can't really play the same way. And I think you kind of have to adapt to that, and that's something Ten Hag needs to think about because it's not the team didn't work then. We lost all control, so he's gonna have to think about
It's good though, isn't it? Because United have got two options. They can either go for
that.
the sort of classic number nine in Rasmus Højlund or go for the false nine and a half player in Xerxes, obviously. He made 20, sorry, the United in general made 91 successful passes, sorry, out of 124 in the final third. That was in the first half. In
Yeah.
comparison to the second half, where Xerxes was subbed, United made 17 passes or successful passes out of 28 in the final third. That just shows how much the drop off is,
Yeah.
doesn't it?
Yeah, that is wow, that's big.
So Tottenham at Old Trafford is next for Eric Ten Hag's side. How do you think this game, or how do you think United will approach this game, Ethan?
All right, it's quite hard to tell because Ange Postecoglou is a good coach and he'll probably want his side to get onto the ball. But I think Ten Hag needs to prove that you call it at this point, he has to be sort of controlling games against Tottenham as Man United. I remember for years under Ollie, like under even Mourinho, we were like sort of crying out for to be able to go to a big game and like control it rather than always playing counter-attacking. And Ten Hag has brought that at times, but I feel like he has to make sure that that's like the precedent. Maybe against City it's different, but even we went toe to toe with City in the FA Cup final and we beat them, so it's doable. But yeah, no, I think he has to. I think he should approach it attacking, going for it. Yeah, I think the thing is, United have created what the second most big chances missed, um, which you can't really blame Ten Hag for. That's not on him. I think United are making the chances. They just need to start taking them. But hopefully, if they can just sort of play the same sort of way they did against Crystal Palace, obviously against a better opposition, but they could do it because I don't think Tottenham aren't like they're not incredible. Don't get me wrong. This could come back to bite me, but I think United should beat them hopefully. But United's form has been a bit rickety-rockety, but they need a win here. Desperately need a win, considering what only 2 wins in 5 now? Or are we on 6? No,
Uh,
5.
yeah, well, if you count the Barnsley game, what's that?
Oh, no,
Yeah,
3 then.
so
But
uh,
yeah, it's a must win, I think, for United. And it'd be good to see United play a dominant, like be able to try and do the same style, like suffocating football that we did against Crystal Palace, and do that against a bigger team, because then that will show real progress for me.
yeah, that's how Spurs play as well. So it will be interesting to see how that game, how open it is. Even
Would you start Agate?
it's a good question. I reckon so. Just because of, I feel like the intensity of the game really suits him. High
Mm,
energy, high press, obviously,
yeah,
but equally, if you do play Ericsson and Mainu and Bruno Fernandes as well, you've got a bit more of control there, like we saw against Palace, and we know how much Spurs press. So
yeah,
if Agate does come on the ball, and we've spoken about this on the podcast before, his he's not inclined to pass the ball forwards. He's more
no.
inclined to pass the ball sideways or backwards, which will put United under more pressure. So it's all dependent on how Spurs play. What do you think Ten Hag will do? Do you reckon he'll start him?
Well, I don't know. It's tricky. I mean, when I was watching you on the United stand last week, talking about, I think you said, did you say Ericsson was your key person to look out for in the game?
Yeah,
Um, because it was sort of midfield wins your games, and if whether his starting position works or not would define how United did, and it did work. Obviously, United didn't get the win, but United were strongly the better team, probably the most dominant I've seen United like against a Premier League opposition in a long time. And yeah, it worked, but you obviously was that because Palace weren't very good. United were good, but I don't like Tottenham will be better and will come
yeah.
out better, and they will be more of a threat on the counter attack. So having Ugarte's legs in there could be pivotal because mainly having to do it all on his own. I feel bad for him this year because he's been given so much to do. Last year he had a lot to do because Casemiro can't cover the ground quite as well. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I think I probably would start Ugarte if he's match fit, if he's ready. Because you need the legs, I think. Even though he's not as good on the ball, I don't think it's going to be a game. I don't see United just like dictating it quite the way they did before. Because Eriksen suits to be able to dictate it. And we thought, oh, maybe Palace will run through the midfield, but they didn't. So maybe it could work again. But I think Tottenham's threat, you need someone that can play that six role, which Eriksen can't really. And I don't think Mainu can do it on his own. So yeah, I would start Ugarte.
I think it's a huge game for the defense as well. You think obviously De Ligt, Martinez, another big game for them after
Yeah.
what happened against Liverpool, especially in the 3-0 loss. This is huge for them because some of the chances in the second half towards the end of the game, about 20 minutes to go, you think about that as a chance which you probably should have buried.
Yeah.
Spurs will take those chances, won't they? So
Yeah.
United
Because
need
they
to be
ran
wary.
there was a few times they just ran straight through, sort of thing. It was a little bit worrying in the second half. You think like should have scored, like they should have. United obviously should have scored, but there was a few times it was a bit gapey towards the back. But that might have been the midfield being a bit vulnerable rather than the defense so per se. But yeah, no, Spurs will take those chances. You're not going to get away with that against big teams. So, I think we've got to be a little bit careful with that because you can get caught on the counter, definitely.
Let's move on to Manchester City, where they had to settle for a 2-2 draw against Arsenal. The game finally lived up to the expectation, didn't it, Ethan?
Oh, that it was some game. I'll never forget that game.
Here is Adam and what he thought on the game.
That Arsenal game was unlike anything I've ever seen in my 13 years watching Manchester City. It was a pretty hectic start. You could tell there's a lot more on the line than just a win. Than the 3 points, I should say. From the first whistle when Havertz went in on Rodri, and Arsenal signalled their intent. And after we took the lead, after Rodri went off, Arsenal kind of showed their credentials, and by turning the game on its head like that, obviously then Trossard got sent off and the game changed. But second half, City didn't play very well. It was very one-dimensional in terms of our approach against such a low block like that. But I would say with I feel like if City were in Arsenal's shoes there and went down to 10 men, I don't think. Well, I know we wouldn't play like that the way Arsenal did. So it's just, I suppose it's contrasting approaches from managers. But I think while Arsenal did obviously fight the very hardest for that point, and say what you want about the way they conducted themselves, you could say it's good gamesmanship. Really, I think if City did that in that position in terms of the time wasted and everything, it's things you do to win the game, I guess. But it's, for me, sitting where I was sat, at least it looks a bit embarrassing. And I think that last gasp Stones equaliser will, as much as a win would have been a huge boost for Arsenal, I think that Stones equaliser will probably be a big psychological blow. Whether it was a better result for Arsenal, I don't know, because City are still top, and losing the head-to-head games against your main rival are often what can decide title races. So I think City have done well there to get that point and to stay top, and it's not a bad result by any means. I think if Rodri didn't go off injured, then City would be coming out of that game smiling. And yeah, I certainly came out of the ground smiling, but I think we'd be very happy with the result if Rodri wasn't injured, whereas that has thrown a whole other thing to consider into the works. So that'll be interesting to see how it plays out for the rest of the title race.
So City obviously took the lead inside, I think it was 20 minutes, Erling Haaland, or 15 minutes. And then Arsenal obviously replied with 2 goals before half-time. Leandro Trossard was sent off. And then City basically camped in the 10-man Arsenal half, or box, should I say, and finally scored through John Stones. It was a chaotic game, wasn't it, Ethan?
Yeah, I think that's probably the only word to describe it. Chaos. Just utter chaos. I don't think I've ever seen a football game like it from start to finish. It was just like it was rattiness to its greatest extent. Every decision and little thing was the crowd, it sounded like a good atmosphere. They were the proper riled up crowd. So, and Adam, who was at the game, said it was very a very, very good atmosphere. So which he might have just said in the clip, which we had to shoe on in. So I don't know, but yeah, um, yeah. I just yeah. How do you describe that game? Mental.
Let's try and break it down. So obviously a big part of this was Haaland versus Saliba and Gabriel, because Saliba and Gabriel have played so well for not just this past couple of games, obviously, but the last two seasons. And to have that sort of rivalry between them two inside this fixture as well, this has taken me back to United versus, well, yeah, United versus Arsenal,
Mm.
Liverpool versus Chelsea. It's sort of those big rivalry clashes now that has bitterness in it.
Yeah, yeah. It was they hadn't scored. I don't think he'd scored against Gabriel and Saliba. I think, don't quote me on that. And he certainly did straight away. It was quite a bullying moment that to just go straight through them. Which would obviously gave City early dominance, which at home you thought, do you know what, they're not gonna lose it from here. But then a game can flip on its head like that, and it certainly did.
What did you make of Arsenal's game plan? Because obviously it changed in the second half, but even in the first half, and it was the same with City as well. None of the teams were really pressing high. It was sort of waiting until the right moment, either to get the ball or when it gets in midfield, get on them straight away and then jump on them and then go and counter attack. It seemed like that type of game, but obviously the second half was totally different. Arteta's tactics in that second half, were you in the camp of sort of that he was right to defend and play inside his box, or would you have thought he would have come out a little bit more aggressive?
Well, I never expected him to do what he did because I have never seen anything like it. I've seen Atletico Madrid and Diego Simeone. I've seen like Inter Milan. Like I've seen some defensive performances, but I have never seen something so deep. And I've never seen a City get so frustrated. Like they were fortunate to get anything out of that game. I like you call me biased, but I think Arsenal were deserving of the 3 points because of how well they defended. Yes, you could say it's negative football, but when you're 10 man down, you're down to 10 men at the Etihad, you you're not gonna you're not I don't you can't really go man to man with them. It's hard enough to go man to man with them with 11 men. Like that was close enough. They couldn't play the same way they did in the first half. Obviously on commentary, I think it might have been Gary Neville kept going. Well, I'm surprised he's not put a target man up there, put someone that, like as a focal point to sort of feed into because they couldn't get out. Like
Yeah.
I don't know what the possession stat was in the second half, but it must have been
I think it
ridiculous.
was 12% to Arsenal. And
Yeah,
they had
checks
two
out.
touches in City's box. It was something like that, yeah.
Yeah, checks out because it was just mental. But I genuinely, that was the most impressive defense performance I've ever seen. Like I wasn't old enough to see like Terry and Carvalho, Vidic and Ferdinand in their earlier days. Like I wasn't old enough to see that like Maldini. Like come on, I'm only 20. But like that was like the best I've seen in just a pure like it was insane. It was honestly so impressive.
Do you know what was funny? I remember on the podcast, I think it was towards the back end of last year, I said that Gabriel and Saliba could be in that bracket, and you laughed at me.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So how the tables have turned, let's just put it that
Well,
way.
I mean, obviously they're top defenders, but it also is a massive credit to the structure Arteta has got defensively there. That takes some doing because you could have an amazing defenders, but City have got the world's best attackers. But I do want to touch upon the strategy of City offensively. I thought it was baffling, and they also mentioned this in commentary. Why Ruben Diaz and Kyle Walker were the main two picking up the ball every single time the edge of the box baffles me. Why would you not have your best attackers because they're not getting the ball in the box, so why not bring them deep so they can because Phil Foden, if you keep giving him an opportunity, he probably might score or it might deflect or something. You just don't know. Whereas Ruben Diaz and Kyle Walker are just not as good on the ball. I was just thinking, I was like, if Trent Alexander-Arnold was in that City team, it would have been game over for Arsenal because he probably would have belted it from 30 yards. But luckily for them, Diaz didn't do much on the ball, but it was baffling to me.
Diaz had 316 touches, so the most out of any player on the field at that
Yeah.
point. Like you said about Foden not moving inside, you think about the goals that he scored, especially against United in the derby when he cuts inside on the edge of the area and puts it in the top corner. It's that type
Within
of
his
goal, isn't
locker.
it?
He's got it in his locker. He could easily do it. You think some of the others will be able to do it. You just think logically you'd have your forwards. Like I know it's like they wouldn't want to be vulnerable defensively, but I think they could have easily taken a centre half on and brought an attacker on because Arsenal did not offer anything, and there was not one point in that half when they were ever like looking like they were going to. There was no threat. They didn't need to have any real defense, ironically, because they couldn't get out. So yeah, I don't know. I was a bit surprised by that. I thought Pep got it wrong, and I thought they were fortunate to get the win, get the draw. Well, a win to them, but I think Arsenal will see that as yes, they did concede in the end, but it was a fortunate goal, and I think mentality wise, that is crazy how far they went. And I think a draw at the Etihad, if they can go win the reverse leg, that's the important thing. Obviously, they did that last year and still don't win the title. But it's annoying because they would have gone top of the league, but now they're still 2 points behind. But I think City will be the happier of the two because of how late on it was. But I think it says a lot about Arsenal's mentality. And I think particularly with the news about Rodri, which I'm sure we're about to get onto, big things could be changing now with the title race.
Yeah, obviously, he's done his ACL in that game against Arsenal in the first half. A massive loss, like you say, for City. Sort of season defining, and what we're only in
Yeah.
match day 5, match day 6 coming up. It's huge, and to lose such a high quality player like Rodri is going to really hurt Manchester City. You think about Kovacic, people could say he can slot in there, but he isn't no Rodri, is he? He's not
Uh,
Rodri.
Well, we don't quite know the extent of the Rodri injury yet. We know it's a knee ligament, which is usually bad news, and it's even worse news for City when you consider how important he's been for us. Last season we had that spell towards the start of the season where he got suspended. We lost at Wolves, the first loss of the season, lost in the cup against Newcastle, lost to Arsenal, lest we forget, and against Villa later on when he had another yellow card suspension. So that just shows how important Rodri is for City, and that's what's got people worried among the City faithful for the rest of the season now. But I think it's easy to forget that we started the season and he wasn't starting every game. Chelsea away, and then the next couple of games as well because he was just coming back from a bit of an injury after winning the Euros. So we started well there. Kovacic filled his boots pretty nicely, and we had Kevin De Bruyne creating. And the thing that kind of can be forgotten is that Rodri was, for the large part, our primary creator last season before De Bruyne came back. And when De Bruyne came back and the next couple of games Rodri missed, including Luton, we won pretty convincingly. I know that is only Luton, no disrespect, but I think having De Bruyne back to do that creating will obviously take the burden off the rest of the team. Whereas if we didn't have Rodri or De Bruyne, I think that's when you'd have the issue like we had when Rodri was out towards the start of last season. So I think, and I back Pep to find solutions. You got Rico Lewis, who basically makes another body in that midfield with all his movement. Gundogan's back now. Kovacic has been really good. We've got more bodies in the midfield with youth as well, like James McAtee, Nico O'Reilly, obviously different roles. But I think I back Pep to think of solutions, and I think if there's one man who can, adapt us for these circumstances, missing our best player, our most important player, I think it's Pep. And I'm not too worried yet, but we have to see how it gets going first, because if we get a few bad results and start underperforming, then it'll be time to get concerned.
So we're going to have to see how this City side copes without Rodri. How do you think they will? Do you think this is clear and easy? It's Arsenal are going to win the league now, or do you still think it'll go down to the wire?
I think you can never rule out City to win the league just because of how strong they are. And they won their first, 4 games before the international break without Rodri, without Foden. And they are still strong. So there is no doubting that they will still be very good because Kovacic is a very good player. But they've also arguably lost the best player in the world. And Rodri, if he was playing in that second half, probably would have also scored from outside the box because of how good he is. For some reason, he's just ridiculously good at outside the box shots. And he always pops up a City with a clutch goal. And that game screamed a Rodri clutch goal from outside the box. But obviously, he's torn his ACL, and that's a horrible injury. And hopefully, he recovers soon. Well, as quickly as possible. But yeah, I think for me, City have always been the defensive midfielder has been the most important position in City's team. Fernandinho was there before him, and he was so critical. No matter he didn't pick up the plaudits quite as much, but Rodri has sort of succeeded him and taken it to a new level. But losing him, I think, is huge. They in the bigger games, I think they will struggle with just Kovacic. I don't know how well Gundogan might be able to like help out in there, to be fair. He didn't really do much against Arsenal. Well, not really many of them did much, to be fair. But
But
yeah,
if
I
it,
think it could be huge. It could like I think this is Arsenal's chance now because City have lost the best player in the world. They won't be able to get another midfielder until January. Um, and I think that's a huge that's the one player you didn't want to lose. And they said, oh, we should really be getting a reinforcement in case Rodri gets injured, and they didn't, and they might be paying the price. So I think if Arsenal are going to win the league, it will be this year because Rodri is their most important player, I think, and the best player in the world.
do you think this also highlights, in a weird way, how Ilkay Gundogan is such a huge signing that's come in for your City, obviously, because if you remove Gundogan from that equation, who have City realistically got in midfield? Kovacic, De Bruyne, and then you could probably play Bernardo Silva or Foden in there. Equally, like Foden's been injured for the start of the season, you don't have him. Who do you play
Yeah.
then?
Yeah, they're fortunate to be fair because they weren't going to sign anyone. It was only because it became available that they did, and they're probably very happy they did now. Gundogan's been able to play all around, like he's done everything for City. I haven't been fortunate enough to really see a lot of him since like this because I haven't caught loads of City games. But I'm sure. Well, I know the Barcelona fans were upset losing him because he's a very good player, and so I'm
Yeah.
sure he'll play a significant role. So yeah, I think it's very, very important that they managed to get him in because otherwise they would have been very threadbare in midfield. But I'm sure Pep Guardiola would have found a way, maybe like Siobhan Rico Lewis in there or
Yeah.
something. But um, or he'd have his next new gen like left back that can play DM or something. He would have done, or maybe even push John Stones into midfield.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a good
something.
shout.
So I don't know. But yeah, Pep Guardiola will find a way around it, and I don't think it won't be like a dominant, no one team dominating. I don't think the title race. I think it'll be close. And I just hope Arsenal win it. I mean, it's not really a great win for either Arsenal or City, but it's better than a Live City or Liverpool, so that's something.
We shall see. City also beat Watford 2-1 on Tuesday night to advance to the Carabao Cup fourth round draw. Here is what Adam thought of that win and a short preview of the Newcastle game on Saturday.
The Watford game in the week was not exactly City's best performance, but we fielded a largely inexperienced side with a few fringe players in there, and for large part we controlled it, and we really should have had more goals, and it wasn't pretty, but we got the win in the end despite the squeaky bum time towards the end. But it's good to see Braithwaite make his debut, 16 years old. And I think there's some of the good signs to take. Jack Grealish played well again. He changed the game against Arsenal, and he was one of our best players against Watford. And I think Savio came off the bench and did excellently again. I think he's got a lot to give for City this season, and I think we're going to see him get better and better. Next round, Spurs away, not ideal, but hopefully we can get that one as well, and hopefully finally get our hands back on the Carabao Cup. But the one concern from Watford really was that the false nine system, in terms of the alternative option to starting Haaland, was a bit unconvincing. So jury's out on that a bit, but hopefully Haaland can stay fit. But that game did allow us to rest the whole team for Newcastle this weekend, which is the early kickoff, and they famously said never back the early kickoff. But Newcastle haven't been amazing to start the season. They might be 3 wins and a draw from the opening 5 games, so 10 points, which isn't a bad return at all. But they were lucky to get a point against Bournemouth. They were quite lucky to beat Wolves 2-1, and of course they beat Spurs, but they only scraped past Southampton. It's been a bit of an iffy start, for lack of a better word, for Newcastle. So I think, and we've got a good record at St James's and against Newcastle, and overall, 1 loss in our last 16 league games at St James's. So I back us to get the win there. Haaland will be back, and Kevin De Bruyne is in contention, I believe. So I don't see why City can't win that game and ease those worries about Rodri's absence. So yeah, I think if we can get that, that would be a 6th win to start the season, a 100% start, then we'd certainly be on our way to a pretty strong campaign.
I was just going to touch upon the fact that City played on the Tuesday, having played on the Sunday night, Sunday afternoon, 4 o'clock, 4:30 game, and then had to play Tuesday night, which is just ridiculous. No matter how big their squad depth is, that just terrible organisation, I think there. And if that was Jurgen Klopp, we would not hear the end of it. I'll tell you that for free.
Now we're going to go on to Manchester United's possibly new stadium or the rebuild. That's what we're going to get into now. Obviously, a questionnaire came out last week to United season ticket holders and members, asking them to fill in a 10 to 15 minute form about what they want if there is a new stadium or if they want to keep Old Trafford and renovate it. What do they want out of what is happening with Ineos and the expansion, obviously, of Old Trafford's regeneration plan with Wharfside? Now, obviously, I know you've not done the questionnaire, Ethan, but from what I gathered from it, it was mainly based around fan experience, fan engagement, music side of things. It also went into like flags and banners if you want that to be added. It was all about rating it from 1 to 5 essentially. So
Yeah.
five being basically yeah, that's what I really want, and one being no, I'm not too bothered about it, and then a neutral as a three in between. So it was quite interesting to fill it out. To be honest, I've done many questionnaires over my life, and this is the one that I've taken the most serious.
Hmm.
So you can see why. But I'm sure you've seen on social media as well the new pictures that have come out if Old Trafford does get renovated. It looks very much like Real Madrid Stadium.
Yeah, from what you've said, that's good that they're doing this sort of thing. Obviously, whether they take it into account is another thing. But it's good that they are making the effort to ask the fans, because they are the fans are the soul of the club, as Sir Chan is famously known for saying. Yeah, it's Bobby, yeah. But yeah, whether they do it, we'll see. But yeah, it's important. All these little things are very important to building up the atmosphere. And hopefully they can sort of take that on board. Whether they build a new stadium or not, we shall see. Obviously, I've recently saw, I think, the idea of making Old Trafford smaller and for academy and women's they deem too difficult now, which
Yeah.
is quite sad. I thought that would have been the perfect thing to do, but if they can't do it, they can't do it, I guess. So we'll see what their final decision is, which should be coming in the next month or two, I think. They said the later end of 2024, so should be expecting it soon. So we shall see.
I presume it'll be after this question. They will take. Gary Neville said that they will take obviously fans into account, hence the question, and they will look at it in depth. In the best scenario for you, though, do you want a new stadium or do you want to keep and renovate Old Trafford?
Don't know. When it was proposed, the idea of making Old Trafford smaller, keeping it on the same site, that I thought was perfect with a big stadium next to it. Because I thought, do you know what? It probably will cost you, well, it will cost a ridiculous amount of money to renovate. It's a building from, 1910.
Yeah.
It's difficult. Obviously, it has got a lot of renovation after the war because of the bombings, but it's a rotting stadium. It hasn't been really upgraded by the Glazers since what, 2006, I think was the last upgrade, maybe 2005.
2005, yeah, I
Um,
think.
so it's not really had anything expansions on it. It needs a massive change. And is it worth getting a new stadium? I don't know. Because I think if you lose Old Trafford, it's like the Emirates. Arsenal haven't won anything since moving to the Emirates. Like, do you lose your soul? Because United is nothing without Old Trafford, because it has only ever been United at Old Trafford, really. Um, so what happens if you move? Do you lose that? Like the whole like last minute winner, this Fergie time at the Stretford end, will it have that same feeling? I don't know. If it's very close to it on the same sort of like campus, maybe, but I don't know if it's just not the same. It might not have the same. If it's too like modernized, would it have the same feeling? It's not had the likes of Ronaldo, Giggs, Beckham, Scholes. It's not had these legends on the pitch. It's not, a new build's always tough, but maybe it's needed. I think it just depends. I don't know. I think it depends
It,
how well they can modernize Old Trafford. If they could do it to a point where it is a genuine state of art from redevelopment, maybe I'd be inclined to go with that. Because it's cool, all well and good to have a shiny new toy. But if they can make it state of the art from redeveloping, I'd like to stay at Old Trafford. But I also understand that it might not be possible. And then having a stadium that's great rather than unbelievable, United should have the best stadium in the world, arguably. And if it's a 100,000 seater, that is the best or one of. So I'm split, but I would like to stay at Old Trafford, I think.
and equally, Ineos have come out and said that it will be 100,000 stadium. That is what they're aiming for, which is obviously huge because United sell out for every single game, like we saw in the Carabao Cup third round against Barnsley. United
Yeah.
sold out for that. So there's obviously the demand there for United fans who are
Yeah.
wanting to go to games. You think about the season ticket holders, the registration list for the season ticket holders is huge. And to get a ticket for even against Barnsley sometimes, maybe Barnsley's a bit different. I think you could get a ticket for that, but
Yeah.
you think about the big games, especially, it is quite hard. So having that extra, what would it be, 25,000 would really help, obviously, the club and more income revenue streams, as well as, like I said before, music and venues that could host that type of stuff. It's another income stream for United. Would you obviously quite like that being at Old Trafford because it does bring more money into the club? It's sort of a no-brainer, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's smart because it just brings more attraction. And that was the whole thing about them redeveloping the area around Old Trafford. They're trying to make this like the most important footballing area in the world, sort of thing, by spending so much time in like the Trafford area. So I think it'd be good if they're going to do that, like how Spurs have done with the NFL. I think it's a good idea. Make Old Trafford a venue where you go again, where tournaments are held, where music venues are held, rather than a rotting stadium. United can't be that to the level club they are. It needs better, but whether they leave or not, it remains to be seen.
Unfortunately, this is the end of this podcast episode. If you did like it and you want to review us on Spotify, there is the option of 1 to 5 star review. Hopefully, you enjoyed it enough to give us a 5 star review. We're also on YouTube now as well, so make sure to come and subscribe. That would be greatly appreciated. And of course, you know where to find us on all of the social media platforms at Tear Us Apart Pod on TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram. So yeah, keep your eyes out and peeled for content on those platforms too. But that's it for this week. We'll see you next week. Bye bye.